What is good, everybody? Juliana Page here, and I'm going to talk to you today about the power, keyword power, of an identity crisis. And I know a lot of times when you think about identity and when you think about a crisis, you don't think that there's power in that. In fact, that's often, especially when you put it together, the time where you feel most powerless and when you feel hopeless or when you feel depressed or discouraged or just overwhelmed and irritable and frustrated, right? And that's not typically a time where you think of power. So I'm going to hone in on this sucker because I feel like there's going to be a lot of freedom that can come from this message. So identity crises, they can happen for a number of reasons. I'll highlight some and I can even share a few from my own story, but it could happen when you get married, right? Like you've been living as an independent entity for the most part, and now the two become one. Or maybe that's not as smooth of a transition as you thought. Or maybe you thought because of, movies and culture and the way social media presents it, that would be a really good fit for you. And you're really struggling because you didn't have the tools. You didn't do the pre-work to help you sustain the work that's in a marriage, right? Or maybe you're now divorced, right? So you lived your life, years of your life, being married to someone and building a life with somebody that is no more, right? Or maybe there was the loss of somebody really important to you and you don't know how to process that and you don't know who you are without your connection to that relationship. Or maybe, you're a new parent and all of these questions about am I good enough are coming up, and you question if you have the identity of being a father or a mother, right? Or maybe you've experienced a traumatic event of some kind that is causing you to really have so many questions, right? Why did this happen to me? What does this mean now? What if that ever happened again, right? You're just inundated with all of these questions that can overwhelm your soul. So essentially, what happens when you feel a sense of you don't know who you are and you're having an identity crisis, you start questioning who you are. You start questioning your values. You start questioning what you're capable of. You start searching for more or searching for something different. And you go on this hunt and this pursuit that seems endless, right? There can be fatigue. There can be irritability. There can be weight fluctuations. Either you're not eating, maybe you're eating too much, or it's just getting out of control. And there could be some really interesting habits that start coming up to maintain a sense of stability and control because everything inside of you feels out of control. Okay, so that's some ways that it could happen, and those are some symptoms of what it might look like experientially. So I know from my own story, there's a great word that we can call it transition, right? Where you're going from one place to another place. That's a very casual way of saying that I had many different identity crises over the course of my life, right? And I think to some degree, it no longer becomes an identity crisis. It becomes something that you get to explore, that you get to discover, that you actually get to look forward to because you're growing into more and more of who you are ideally, right? Like as a believer, you're going from strength to strength and from glory to glory. And so you're activating different parts of your potential. Like God put seeds down on the inside of you that you start developing over time. And it's interesting when you learn how to experience different parts of yourself, right? So it can become something that will be vulnerable, yes. Will feel awkward, yes, but will be something that you can look forward to and you can enjoy too rather than run from. But I'm going to explain how I got there because it was not always like that for me. So I would say my first identity crisis happened when I was 9, close to 10. And it's when I found out that I was adopted. So my biological mom was put on the phone with me. My adoptive mom handed me a phone, and my birth mom, see how confusing it is? So my adoptive mom put me on the phone with my birth mom and said that your mom wants to talk to you. So in an instant, the life that I knew up to that point radically shifted, and I didn't know what that meant. That was traumatic. I didn't know how to process that. I didn't even know what the word trauma was at that point. And there was a whole bunch of other things that were going on at that time. But I would say experientially, I felt unsafe. I felt betrayed. I felt abandoned. And I felt like I needed to then become useful or become valuable, because clearly I wasn't. Because not only did one mom let me go, but this other one was kind of doing it in that moment too. It was very bizarre, and there was many other issues going on there. But that was a time in a season where my identity was forming, and I learned that I was not valuable, right? I was not worthy unless I proved it, which was not a good message, because that turns into things like perfectionism. That turns into things like people pleasing. That turns into things like codependency, right? When it starts manifesting. So that was a really unhealthy switch. Then my identity in that time and in that season morphed into an academic and an athlete. I really applied myself in those areas, right? And then around the time of college, my adoptive father had married my stepmother, and it was the day after I graduated high school. So there was no transition. I'm no longer in high school anymore. The next day, I'm moving in and blending a family with my stepmom and her daughters. And then I'm going to be going to college in a few months. So I'm completely uprooted from any sense of normalcy that I once had. That season was over overnight. Now I'm working a couple of jobs because I just want to stay busy, because I don't know how to handle this, right? And then I'm going to college, and I'm breaking up with my first boyfriend because we're going to different places. And I'm starting a new school where I'm still applying athletics. I was a track athlete. So I was running track in college, but it felt so different than what it had felt like in high school. And so I was also in a large high school, and this was a smaller liberal arts college. So it just felt completely crazy. And so another identity crisis started happening there, because if I'm no longer an athlete, yes, I can be an academic, but now the question is, but what am I doing all of this hard work for? Like, what am I on the earth to do? Like, who am I, right? So I went on this crazy career search. I was just so career driven. And that lasted from probably college through grad school. And then also when I was getting certified as a coach. And then it started again when I had moved across the country and was, launching a new business and figuring out who I was as a business owner. And then there's been relationships where I've constantly had to re-identify who I am. So there's more and more and more, but I've probably had at least probably like 15 significant times where I've really had to question, who am I? And I don't think that that's a bad thing, because I think it really helps you to get rooted and grounded in who you are, which only helps you to communicate and express that better. So it's not necessarily bad, but I've had the mix of life changes that have brought a change in identity, not necessarily a change in identity, but a crisis around identity, right? Like if you're no longer an athlete, if you're no longer an academic, right? But I can take pieces of those things. So some have come from trauma, some have come from significant life change, some have come from breakups, some have just come from life, right? But I can take bits and pieces. So I know I love learning. So I'm going to be a lifelong learner. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be an academic, right? Degrees and certifications, all of that's great, right? But I continue to learn and apply myself every day. So I'm grateful for that. Or the athletics, I'm grateful that that taught me discipline and self-control and things that I can apply in my life day to day. Or really doing the work to get to know who I am and what I value helps me really own that and show up in that. And it helps me connect with the right people and to invest in the right thing. So there's a lot of value in it, although it can feel really jarring and really scary. So what I want to highlight is really 3 things that you can do when you feel like you are in an identity crisis. You thought you knew who you were, but now this thing is happening. So who are you in the middle of this thing, and how can you apply yourself, right? It's tricky, right? So the first thing would be when you are in an identity crisis, you can find power by looking within. One of the worst things that you can do is bombard yourself with questions. So when you look within, I say you examine your soul. What's going on in your mind? What's happening with your emotions? And what is going on with your will? What are you applying yourself in? What are you doing? What are you spending your time doing? So think about applying your will to things that are valuable versus things that are destructive. Okay, because it can really become a powerful thing, but it can be really disempowering if you use this time to numb out, to overeat, to consume a lot of drugs and alcohol, right? To hang out with the wrong crowd, to associate with the wrong people. So it can be powerful if you choose it, or it can be disempowering also. So pay attention, but look within. So what's really helpful, I know that I've done many retreats. I've asked myself some really tough questions, and as scary as they are, you do start to get the answers. But my recommendation would be to ask these questions with God. Okay, because your questions are not too much for God. They might be too much for you, and they might be too much for some other people, right? Depending on their carrying capacity, if you will. But your questions are not too big for God, and God can give you truth and prophetic words and revelation and wisdom and discernment for the season that you're in. If you don't know God, I know that that can be really scary too. I spent a majority of my life not in a relationship with God. So I was trying to figure out all those answers by myself. So I would recommend exploring who you think God is. But really, yeah, I would say apart from God, it's really hard to know who you are. So I would look within, but don't do it by yourself. Do it with God. Secondly, I would clean house. And what I mean by that is you. Clean the home that is you. So for example, from somebody who has moved across the country several times, has, really invested in a lot of different life experiences, jobs, internships, many different things, just taken some big leaps of faith. That's always tricky, but I always had to find a home base. And then I realized I could become it. But there were certain things that helped me relax, that helped me chill out. So for example, I found that when I go to a spa, I can instantly relax, but that's because of different essential oils, okay, that they have. What do they say that? Diffusing, right? So I found ones that are calming. I like eucalyptus. I like, what else do I like? Tea tree sometimes. There's another one that I really, really like. Ooh, I can't think of it right now. But at any rate, you find the one that you like, and you can even put that in the shower and take a hot shower, and you're having a spa experience wherever you are, even if you're traveling. You can get a diffuser and have that diffusing through a room, right? But you can create that sense of calm that you experience at the spa wherever you are. Or another thing that I've done is I find that I need to move my body every day. So I now do workout programs at home, because I found, especially since I'm a morning person, what kind of had me in a funk was if I had to get out and go into the world too quickly. It just did not work well. Like, even if it was something like, get up, get in your car and go drive and like do a Starbucks run through or something, I couldn't have that a part of my routine. I just couldn't. So I now make warm drinks at home. I don't talk to humans. I get a workout in, and I just work out at home. And that is also a really great thing, because I can, again, how do I say this? I can initiate these routines no matter where I am. So even if I'm staying with a friend, even if I'm at a hotel, even if I'm, visiting family or something, I can still do these routines. I can still work out in my room. I can still drink a coffee, whatever it is, but doing those things. So a morning routine, and particularly one that has a lot of quiet, that allows me to be still, right? There's a saying, I think it's I don't know who says this actually, but it's really good. It's like, what exercise does for the body, stillness does for the mind. So I need a lot of stillness, because I'm like high energy. I'm a goer. I'm a get things done kind of girl. So I need that, particularly in the morning, because that's when I can receive the most, I would say, divine content, divine information, downloads, right? Music. I really enjoy putting on music that's not, I love music, but that doesn't have all the beats, that doesn't have all the lyrics. That's just calm worship music, or even spa music, but that does something too. And then I can just journal. But finding ways to create safe space no matter where you are. So all of those things that I'm listing don't really depend on an environment, but I also recommend having a space that you can go to, particularly in your home, in your apartment, even if it's a room that you have, just a space that is yours. I've done it in a closet even, but you just create a space that is just for you, where you can decompress. You don't have to show up for anybody else. You can journal, you can visualize, you can meditate on the Word of God, you can pray. Just create a way that you can constantly come back home. okay, where there's peace. Like you have security and safety in just being able to be by yourself. And you can recreate that wherever you go and no matter what's going on around you. And you can carry that unique rhythm that's created wherever you go. So you can be peace in the midst of chaos. You can be joy, like the joy of the Lord is your strength. You can be joy in the midst of negativity and darkness. You can be wise in the midst of just lack of common sense, right? But if you practice these things, you'll find that you can apply them when you need them most, which is a really beautiful thing. And you know it's a really good practice or a ritual when you miss doing it for a day and it like throws off your jam. That's when you know that you found whatever your kind of go-to habits, the come home habits, let's call them that. So that's what I would recommend. Come up with what your come home habits are so that it's not dependent on anybody else, but you can always come home and feel safe with yourself. And then lastly, evaluate what you value. There's so much power in constantly being able to evaluate what you value and really honestly to assess who you are, right? Like if you are on social media too long, you'll start to question what you value. If you are working in an organization that is countercultural to what your morals are and how you conduct yourself, you might start looking like that if you're not careful. So it's really important to be aware of how you show up. Is that attitude reflective of who you are? Is that mindset reflective of who you are? Is how you're expressing yourself reflective of who you are, right? And the more you get consistent in who you are, the easier it is to answer those questions, okay? So evaluate who you are, but also what you value. And the quickest way to do this is take a look at your calendar and take a look at your bank statement. Straight up. That is the quickest way that will inform me, but really inform you what you value. So if you go look at your bank statement, where's your money flowing? What are you spending it on? Is it alcohol? Is it designer bags? Is it vacations? Is it Netflix? Is it Target? I don't know what it is, right? But take a look at your bank statement and see what you're spending all of your funds on, all of your resources on, and then look at your calendar. What are you blocking time out for? How are you actually spending your time? And if you're not blocking on anything on your calendar, that's also informative too, right? Because how are you spending your time? So I will say, if I look at my calendar right now, it's dedicated to my purpose and what I'm on this earth to do and service. And then if I look at my bank statements, a majority of what that has been is home and like things to upkeep the home and groceries, right? Because I don't spend a ton of money on designer bags and all that stuff. That's not necessarily my thing, but I do spend money on my health because in order to maintain a really busy schedule, I've got to have really good energy to do that. And I've got to have a healthy body and mind and soul to do that. So just some examples, but my invitation to you on today is that as jarring, as intimidating, especially if this is the first identity crises that you feel that you're in, there is power in it. And it is not something that you have to run from. We are constantly, if you're a believer, you are constantly being transformed by the renewing of your mind. So you are constantly becoming, and that can be a beautiful thing. But when we're in environments where we're not encouraged to grow, where we're not encouraged to evolve, or when we aren't able to say who we are, what we do, who we work for, why we do it, when we can't ask all these like very surface level questions that people can sometimes come at us with, that can feel really intimidating. It can feel, really confusing. You can feel insecure. You can have just a lot of anxiety. Like, I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. I got to figure out how I can be. Right? So there's a lot of fear connected to that. If I'm not this, then what does that mean? If I'm not connected to this person, then who am I? If I'm not this, then, right? Like, there's a lot of that can happen. But when you look inward and you actually can honestly answer those questions, who am I? That's a really good question to ask all the time, right? Because you want to be able to give the best of who you are, but you can't do that if you don't actually ask that question. All right? Because sometimes finding out who you are is identifying everything that you're not. Or when you're born again, you understand what it means to now be a new creation. Old things have passed away, new things have come. And you get to embrace the wonderful new every day if you choose it. But that's new, right? If you had all these old habits and patterns that you're used to operating in, how do you embrace this wonderful new self, right? That's new. So looking inward can really be a beautiful gift, and answering that question, who am I, is such a powerful one. And it's always good to find out how you can be safe, secure, independent in your own soul, how your thoughts don't have to dominate you, how you don't have to identify with your emotions. You can feel them, but they don't have to rule you, or how you can really understand what's going on in your heart and how you can come home to yourself every day, and creating different rituals that help you stay strong, that you even look forward to. Like, you can get to a point where you look forward to wake up just to have you time, because the rest of your day might be dedicated to everybody else. But just being able to wake up and having a morning routine and have some you time is something that you look forward to, because it informs your day, and it informs with intention how you're going to show up and run the day versus letting the day run you. So always being able to come home. It's, if you practice that every day, you can do it at work, you can do it on an airplane, you can do it with family, you can do it in the midst of a conflict or a situation that's heated. You can come home because you've practiced those things. You can basically, what you can do is draw yourself out of the situation and kind of look at yourself in the situation and decide if you're going to respond to it versus just reacting like we typically do. So you get more power the more you practice that inward work. And then lastly, it is always important to evaluate what you value, to make sure that you're stewarding well what you've been given, that you're not just wasting time, energy, resource, right? Or just being reckless about your journey, right? And your impact and your influence that you have. So my encouragement, and also the invitation on today, is asking yourself, how can this be the most powerful transformation of my life? Versus scary, versus fearful, versus bad, right? How can this be the most powerful transformation of my life? How can I really see, or what is the power in this thing that I'm calling a crisis? Maybe it's not even calling it a crisis at all. Just a thought. Well, I hope this message blessed you. And if you are in a situation where you are evaluating your identity or rediscovering who you are, I have a 6-week self-mastery course over on julianapage.com. So if you want information on that, go check that out. I also do one-on-one coaching and also group coaching. So check that out if that's something that would support you, because asking and answering these questions is really tough work, and it's easy to run from. So I know for me, I had to work with a coach to really work this stuff out and enjoy the process and have fun with it. So if that interests you or someone you know, go check that out. And then you can also follow me on Instagram at Miss Juliana Page. So if this message blessed you, make sure you subscribe. And if you can bless somebody you know, copy the link and share with the friends. All right, guys, until next time.